Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Metaphysical Egypt. I'm Allan Peoples, again with Patricia Awyan Lehman. Hi, Patricia.
Hey, Alan.
And we're joined today by a special guest, Brien Foerster. Hi, Brien.
Greetings.
Brien, as everyone I know knows that'll be watching this, is he's actually the world's expert on elongated skulls, the ancient elongated skulls that have been found. Obviously, so many in Peru and Bolivia, but in also many other areas in the world, and also an expert on ancient technologies in Peru and Bolivia and other places all over the world. He's been traveling with us in Egypt at least once a year since 2013, I believe. So almost 9 years now. So we're here today to talk about our upcoming trip in April, where we're going to actually we have several private permissions to some very exciting places. And we're going back to Roash for the first time in many years, I think at least 6 or 7 years. And we're also going into the north entrance of the Step Pyramid. So some very exciting things that we'll discuss as we move through some. We're going to offer you a presentation that will show you some of the highlights of the things that we do when we're in Egypt together. Brien brings a lot of excitement to to our tours when we work with Brien, and he truly is the expert when we talk about ancient machining and the different layers of site changes and transformation as we move through from pre-dynastic times all the way to the later dynastic times. So let's get started. As Brien will tell you, one of the things we talk about is how the technical expertise actually declines, that we see some of the most amazing feats of craftsmanship and capability in the far more ancient times. And one of those examples is here with, when we look at the more ancient columns, they're carved out of one solid piece of stone. And then we get to the dynastic times. This is a column from Karnak, and they layer it in drums from sandstone, which is a much softer stone. And I'm sure Brien can add a lot about the site transformation and repurposing.
Sure. Well, actually, in the photo that you're looking at now, I believe that's on the left, that's Dendera.
Yes.
And you can see that granite grinding wheel, which probably could have been repurposed during either dynastic or even later times, like Ptolemean times, that it's granite, which would have probably come from Aswan and clearly was recycled from a much older structure, because you can see that the hieroglyphs are not totally intact. Obviously, they went off to the left and the right as well. And the original function of whatever that piece of stone was probably simply pragmatic or practical. And then later it was turned into a grinding wheel, again, maybe during Roman times or earlier. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Serapeum at Saqqara, where there are about 23 enormous stone boxes, some weighing as much they don't all weigh 100 tons, but some weigh as much as is estimated 100 tons. 70 tons for the box, 30 tons for the lid. The box is made out of one piece of stone. The lid is cut from the same block of stone, and that's what we're going to see in the Cairo Museum. If we're going to go there, is that you'll see there's one that's unfinished. But what's obvious from visiting the Serapeum is that the hieroglyphs are incomplete and were obviously done much later with much cruder technology than the manufacturing of the boxes themselves. Again, the granite or syenite or diorite probably comes from the area of Aswan, which is at least 400 miles to the south. And there's no evidence that the Egyptians ever built ships large enough to be able to carry these giant boxes. And then how it got from, if it was carried on a ship, how it was carried from the Nile to this location, which is miles into what is now the desert.
Exactly. We also have the picture of the layer upon layer of building construction from the lower right-hand corner at Elephantine. And then I think the upper left-hand corner is the Temple of Luxor. And you can actually see many levels with even the mosque that exists within the temple walls.
Mm-hmm.
And here, another example of a column that was, you can obviously see it was quarried from a more ancient site.
Is this at Abydos?
I believe that is at Abydos. Yep, in front.
Oh, okay. Well, what's being shown in this picture is what I was just talking about. The photograph on the left is an unfinished box that is located in the Cairo Museum. What we can see is that there were two circular saws that were cutting the lid off the box, and then something happened. There was probably too much pressure applied to the saws as they were cutting through the box, causing the blades to vibrate and then causing part of the lid to literally snap off. And then on the right-hand side, this is outside the Valley Temple, I believe.
Yep.
At Giza, and these are two profiles that were originally up on the wall of the building. There are several more that are actually stored inside of the structure. And when you run your hands across the surfaces, you can tell that they could not have been done using hand tools. They had to have been machined, and that is evidenced by other experts that we've had, like Christopher Dunn and Stephen Mailer, and other people like Ben of Uncharted X and Jimmy of Bright Insight.
Yep, absolutely incredible. An incredible feat that would be nearly impossible to do today. So, yeah. And here we point out the mistake that was made for so many years of dating and relating the sites to the writings found on the artifacts found at the sites, sometimes on the temple walls, on the structure walls. But this is a great example of an item that's dated back to 4500 BC. 2500 BC to the 4th dynasty, Pharaoh Khafre. And you can see again, Brien pointed out the basically chicken scratch that was on the box in the Serapeum. And you're looking at the same thing here on this incredibly finely crafted statue, the writings that look like chicken scratch, dated to the Old Kingdom, that, is telling us that the statue is probably far more ancient.
Yeah, definitely. You can see how highly I believe that's diorite, which is a type of very fine type of granite. And you can see the incredible high polish. We do see evidence of dynastics statues, which were done in hard stone, but they're much, much cruder. They don't have a polish to them. They were hammered out using probably stone dolerite ball hammers, but this has such a gleam that it's it's a glass-like reflective surface. And the dynastic people, as far as we know, did not have ground up diamond powder to be able to use as a polishing compound. They couldn't have used sand because sand is of the same hardness as the stone itself. So that gives us an indication that, as Patricia said, this statue originally is far, far older, constructed by a culture that had very advanced high technology, and then was later repurposed during dynastic times. And as she said, the inscription put in looks like it was done with a hardened nail or something like that, or a very crude chisel.
Yeah, exactly. And here it's, I think, Brien, you actually took this picture of me in the Valley Temple, and the structure itself is, it's structured very similar to the Osirion, and, probably far more ancient, again, than what it's currently dated to. But I want to point out that Hakim, and Abdel Hakim Awyan is the indigenous Egyptian. He was an Egyptologist. He had degrees in both Egyptology and archaeology, but he became a tour guide. He had more than 65 years of site experience. And so he presented the temple structures. He called them purbas, or places of spirit. So it was the place for the experiencing of the energy of the temples that will interact with your body, mind, and spirit, your physical, mental, and spiritual self. And I also would call the temples the halls of records. So many people write to me and they're interested in where the Hall of Records is in Egypt. And I would say that it's everywhere because there's so much information, mathematical, astronomical, biological. There's so much information embedded and embodied within all of the structures that we look at. And one of the things Hakim had said, as I said, he called them purbas. They were built above or in the same site as the older structures to realign them with the transforming cycles of precession and continue the migration of knowledge. They are built in sacred geometric patterns, utilizing combinations of rocks and minerals with subterranean flowing water to harness the natural flow of the energies of the earth, the heavens, solar, stellar, and lunar currents at specific locations to create interactive force fields. So it gives you an idea of how powerful these structures are that we're going to be visiting in April. Truly amazing. And temples below temples below temples.
And it gives you an idea of why they dismantled these temples and rebuilt them.
Exactly. But it was always the place that was important. And this is really an important thing to understand. And even today, our churches, even in Peru, when I visited Peru, the churches are built over far more ancient structures.
Always.
And the cathedrals in Europe and everywhere in the world, if I've been down several different levels in like Notre Dame and Chartres and some of the cathedrals in Europe. And it's just incredible. So yeah, structures below structures below structures and layer upon layer upon layer. Okay, driving home the point.
Well,
So
we also talked before about seeding, the importance of the
seed stones.
Seed. Right.
Yes.
So you would take a stone from the old temple, turn it upside down, and that would be like our modern day version of the cornerstone of a new construction. Right. It's the foundation stone that the new temple is built upon is from the old temple.
And what you're presenting there is the fact that these are living structures. All of them were considered to be alive. And that's what this underground running water, the water we find underneath all of these structures is helping to, energize, the psionic energy that's being harnessed by the particular specific type of rock and stone and geometric design. So, but here I want to point out that we are doing something unique at Brien's request, and that is starting in Aswan and moving our way up the Nile, actually down the Nile, because the Nile is it's the major river that flows, the only major river that flows north from south to north. So we'll be starting in this beautiful place of Aswan. And here's Brien in a pit at Elephantine Island. So, Brien, tell us about this incredible box shrine.
Well, once again, it's made of granite from Aswan, so it's local. But of course, we find large granite objects all throughout Egypt that had to have been transported from or cut from Aswan and transported somehow from Aswan. But it's you can tell that it's unfinished. It's a giant one piece that looks like it was going to have a set of two doors where you can see where that drill hole is. So doors would have been fitted to it. And there's a sister object similar to it, which is broken into several pieces off to the right-hand side, made of more of a black granite. And when we go there, we'll see that the big one that's similar size that's broken was obviously being repurposed. We see chalk marks and different etching marks in the stone where probably during dynastic times they were planning on cutting it. The mystery is this the original location of where this object or these objects were being manufactured, or were they being transported from somewhere else? This could very well have been the actual manufacturing site itself, but they're very mysterious objects. We see finished ones at different locations. I believe there's one at the Temple of Edfu. And again, repurposed, used for something symbolic during dynastic times, but the original function could simply have been pragmatic or practical. Maybe it operated, some people speculated it was some kind of phone booth or an acoustic device of some kind for transmitting energy, either thought or sound or both, from one location to another.
Yeah, really incredible. And you can see how large it is next to Brien and some of the guests from our tour. Just incredible. The Aswan Quarry.
Oh, yes. This is the
did they make them?
largest.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Brien.
Sorry. This was an attempt at the largest obelisk, weighing in somewhere in the nature of 1,100 tons, said to have been done during the time of Hatshepsut, but that's highly unlikely because you can see simply from the scale of it, once they were able, if they were ever able to cut it from the mother stone, how were they planning on lifting it out of the location where it's at? Because the area of Aswan is not flat at all, it's very hilly. So to get that, if you were able to get it out of the pit, how are you going to transport it down to the Nile without snapping it into several pieces? And then on the right-hand side, this is what the Egyptologists claim was used to shape it, a simple dolerite, which is a type of granite, pounding rock. We see lots of them strewn about at the location, but they were probably put there by the archaeologists themselves. It's impossible that this stone would have been used to shape the giant obelisk because dolerite is only slightly harder than the granite itself. So as you're pounding away at the big obelisk with these stone balls, the balls are going to fall apart about as fast as any dust that's going to come off the obelisk itself.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you can see with the scooping marks. And we'll see a whole lot more when we're at the quarry, but it's interesting how they sort of start in the top rim and then they go down, way down into the pit. And how do they do that with a dolerite ball? It boggles the mind because in some areas it looks like they've scooped the granite or the syenite with like it's butter. It's just incredible.
Yeah, literally like ice cream. They somehow softened the stone and just literally scooped it out.
Yeah, and
That's
all of the scoop marks are almost exactly the same dimension. So it looks like it had to have been some kind of device that was utilized to remove the stone. You see it on the vertical surfaces, and you see it on the horizontal surfaces as well. And at that location, we also see the technique that was used during dynastic times, which was simply somehow creating grooves in the stone and then putting in wooden wedges, then pouring hot water on the wooden wedges. And over time, that would cause the stone to crack, but it would never create a straight line. It would create a very rough surface, which then would have to be smooth. And they didn't have the technology to, once again, to smooth the stone to a very, like a shiny surface like we saw in that statue.
Exactly. Oh, and I wanted to point out we're going to be on a beautiful cruise for 4 nights as we go to some of the temples along the Nile, like Kamumbo, temples of Horus and Sobek, the crocodile netter, and the incredible temple at Edfu. So it's a great time to enjoy and relax and actually look at life along the Nile. In some instances, it seems almost like it was in very ancient times.
This is the shrine you were just mentioning at Edfu.
Exactly. That's why I was smiling.
And this is one piece as well, one piece of stone?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. And they want to date it to Nectanebo I, who was like the 30th dynasty of Egypt, the last actual dynasty of Egypt. There was a brief resurgence, but obviously it was usurped. In my opinion, obviously far more ancient, as Brian's pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
So we have lots to talk about at Edfu. We'll talk about the building texts, the Ark of the Covenant, Zep Tepi, so many different things while we're there that are just incredible. And I also wanted to point out we'll be visiting Luxor Temple, the only temple we'll be visiting at night. And it's really quite an experience to walk through a temple in the evening. Again, just a really powerful experience. So here we are. Where are we now, Brien?
We are at the Osirion at Abydos.
Oh yeah,
And the great thing about this is that we have we're going to rent the complex of the Osirion for 2 hours. It appears that it was built on purpose underground because all the other structures in the area are much higher. And also, if you go straight through, you'll see there's a tunnel. And when you turn to the right inside the tunnel, it goes on for several hundred feet. There are dynastic paintings and etchings on the walls, but clearly, just looking at the scale of the large stone blocks you can see, this is a megalithic structure that was built during pre-dynastic times, was later inherited and repurposed by the dynastic people.
Yeah, most definitely. I have a few slides here. And I also want to point out, Suzan Moore is our team geologist. She's a world-class Jurassic geologist who will be with us in April. And she is an expert on the stones, and a lot of the things we'll be talking about, what's really capable technically, when we're shaping and thinking about these large and very hard different textures of stone. So yeah, she's going to be with us. And then this, I thought it was just interesting to show what a theoretical reconstruction of the Osirion would have looked like. And it just shows you we would have had a ceiling with these huge heavy blocks on top. Here's an image that was made by Keith Hamilton. He did a beautiful white paper on the Osirion, and he shows, here's a side section, but you can see it from above, and look how much granite there is there. And they say that some of the larger stone blocks, and they're I think they're pointing to the ones that are vertical, but can weigh up to 100 tons. And as Brien keeps saying, the quarry for these things, the granite or the syenite or the diorite, is in Aswan, which is way far to the south, at least 300 kilometers from Abydos.
Mm-hmm.
Just mind-boggling to think how they transported them. They do say that this is an ancient tomb of Osiris. They say it's the burial ground for his head. There's so many different things we'll talk about. Some believe it could have been a very ancient resurrection device, but it's shaped in a way like the images of the primeval mound, which again, Zep-Tepi, surrounded by primordial waters. So the mound emerges as the waters recede after the last global, the huge cataclysmic event that they speak about 12,500 years ago. So things that we can talk about within the structure. So yeah, so many things we can discuss. This is actually the image you see as you're walking under the first gate to get to the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. And I just wanted to include it to point out that Hakim had told us that this meant it's the only place in Egypt you see the underbelly of the winged scarab, a symbol of a great awakening after a period of sleep or a night cycle. But he told us that this meant you were entering a place that held the answers to all the secrets and mysteries of the universe. I have spent probably the last 12 to 14 years with a huge focus on studying this particular temple. It's one of my favorites. So many things to share here, including the famous Dendera zodiac and what it could actually mean. It holds so much information within this, one block that's, on the ceiling of the second level of the temple. The original, this is a picture of the original, was stolen and taken to the Louvre in Paris, but they did create a replica for us. And we find this in the crypt. And so many people want to call this the Dendera light bulb. So we'll talk about, is it really an ancient light bulb, or is it more what is said on the walls, that this is actually basically the birth of the cosmos, and in a pattern that could actually emulate a formula for creating a light bulb. So much information.
And we covered this in detail in one of our previous episodes.
Oh yeah, we do. But Brien, this is one of Brien's favorite sites. We always stop and spend some time at the Colossi of Memnon.
That's right. I insist that we stop here each time because these are incredibly impressive. The one on the left is still relatively intact. The one on the right was rebuilt, I think, during early Roman times, very badly, a bad attempt to try to repair it. But the one on the left, the statue is one piece of stone weighing in at approximately 720 tons. It's on a base which is between 250 and 300 tons. The stone comes from, I believe it's called Red Mountain in Cairo. So that's a distance of 400 miles. So again, 720 tons. How would you possibly move something of that scale?
That's so interesting that they moved those stones all the way from Cairo, whereas most of the time they move the Aswan stones up to Cairo.
Yeah, that's true. And what we also see, and Suzan backs me up on this, you see that the weathering on the front is much more than on the sides, and there's almost none on the back. So it looks like it was a victim of some kind of solar plasma event or some kind of extreme high scorching heat that literally caused the front surfaces to explode off the surface, because the discoloration, I mean, this is quartzite, so it should be like a creamy pinky color. And we see that it's totally discolored. You'll see areas that are blue and purple and black and orange. So clearly there was a massive heat event that came from the east and hit it. Also at the nearby Ramesseum, we see other evidence. There's a 1,000-ton statue that is now in pieces that again was probably hit by that one was probably hit by the same event or series of events.
Yeah, this thing would have been a monster statue. We see parts of the knees and the feet and the hands, but when it was all one piece of a sitting king or pharaoh, if you will, probably not, far more ancient, usurped by Ramses II, like so many things were. But it would have been more than 18 meters high. It would have towered over, even the Colossi of Memnon at more than 1,000 tons, if you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another favorite area in Karnak.
Yeah, this again, backed up by Suzan, our geologist. Some sort of major heat event happened at this location, causing the rapid expansion of the stone. The crystal structure on the inside is much coarser than the crystal structure on the outside. So she believes, and others believe, that again, this was the victim of some kind of massive heating event causing the rapid expansion of the stone. And once again, we're talking pre-dynastic, which would be, again, we're talking about a series of events that happened somewhere around 12 to 13,000 years ago.
Yep. It's actually really incredible to see. And you can pick up pieces of this diorite and it just crumbles in your hand. It's just amazing. And then we can't forget, we'll take a stop, we'll stop and visit this incredible statue of Sekhmet that Hakim had said is probably the oldest statue on Earth, still standing in its same place. And it's in a chamber to the left of the site. And it truly is amazing. And what I point out when I talk about this statue is, we do spend time here, and people have some of the most powerful experiences in this chamber with this statue. And the thing is that the ancients, and we're talking again pre-dynastic times, had the ability to fashion, to craft an image with such incredible ability that it came alive. They understood the energetics of shape and angle and form And so when we say that, you know, she is alive or her eyes are alive, it's really the result of an incredible ability to create, an incredible artistry, if you will. So again, an amazing place to experience the energy of the site. And after we visit this several different, and we can't talk about them all today in this, you know, this short presentation, but we'll see many more sites in Luxor and Aswan, the Temple of Philae, the Valley of the Kings, some of the incredible symbolism in the tombs. But after we leave Luxor, we'll fly back to Cairo, where we'll spend time visiting, you know, all the sites in Giza, Saqqara. And here we are actually looking at a cross-section of the Step Pyramid. And this is by special request by Brien. We're going to not enter the south entrance, but we're going to enter from the north, which is going to enable everyone to go in through all of these amazing old shafts and tunnels, but to get down to the very box that you can only look at from far above if you enter the public entrance from the south. And that was just opened a couple years ago, I think in 2020.
Yeah, and also this is where between 30,000 and 40,000 very finely crafted stone vessels, such as the ones that you see on the right-hand side of this picture, were located. You know, once again, they're made of very hard stone, basically impossible to shape by hands with the technology that the dynastic Egyptians had. So clearly these were an inheritance from a much older time period, pre-dynastic, that were then inherited and then utilized. And then for some reason, all of them, or almost all of them, were buried underneath the Step Pyramid in this series of shafts and tunnels. We don't know how much of the tunnel system will be open to us on that day, but we do have excellent people who work for us or with us, like Mo Taha, who's very influential with local officials to be able to allow us to go to places which are not accessible to the general public. I mean, you can pay a certain amount of money in the thousands of dollars to access sites such as underneath the Step Pyramid from the northern side, but that doesn't automatically mean you have access to the whole system underground. So it's with people like Mo that we depend on to be able to prompt the officials to allow us to see as much that is possible to see without, of course, creating any kind of damage to the underground structure. But I'm very much looking forward to this, because I've never been down the northern entrance before, so this will be a great gift for me and for everybody.
Absolutely incredible, and almost like an Indiana Jones experience. At least when I was down the last time, it was really just incredible. And even then, you might even see bits and pieces of chipped of these vases and bowls and what have you. It's really an incredible experience. And here again, I just want to point out that Suzan will be with us to share what's possible, you know, with these rocks and minerals. And I like to show the Mo scale because it shows you, you know, a lot of the temples we see in the south are made of sandstone or limestone, you know, are 3 to 4 on the Mo scale. But as we go higher and we go back in time to the more ancient sites, we'll see the basalt here is the highest at 8. But it goes up to corundum, which is 9. And we actually see bowls made of corundum, which is something that could have even been used like diamond to carve at one time. Again, another diagram just to show you how intricate, you know, they say up to 3 miles of shafts and tunnels underneath this ancient pyramid. They attribute it to Djeser. We say Djeser in Egypt. That's what the locals say. King Zoser or Djoser or Djeser or Neterket was the hieroglyphic name for Djeser, but probably far more ancient. And it very possibly could be the most ancient pyramid because the structure was built, you know, what we see underneath is so ancient. And then we see possibly restoration work on top by who they said the architect was Imhotep. But again, built in so many different layers upon layers through time, different time periods. And then this is the focal chamber where the granite box is. And this is where you'll be able to go on this private visit. We have 2 hours underneath this pyramid. So it's really an exciting visit. Okay, so we're also going to point out the area that Hakim had called the Ancient Sound or Frequency Healing Hospital. It's actually during, also used during dynastic times as a Hebset. It's called the Hebset Court for the Hebset rituals of the kings. But what we'll talk about is how they utilized shafts of running water and a certain combination, again, of stones to create a facility that they were able to utilize frequency and sound to heal, restore, and balance the body, mind, and spirit, which was also an integral part of these ancient Hebset rituals. So it's interesting how they can still integrate and use the site at different time periods for similar functions. And here we have Brien again at the Serapeum, which is also at Saqqara.
That's right. And I'm in front of a box that was in a partial stage of completion, quite rough surfaces still. But the one on the right-hand side is the one that quite normally you're able to fully access, at least the exterior of it. And what you can see, again, this is one of the biggest ones. Christopher Dunn estimates the box to be 70 tons, the lid to be 30 tons. I believe there are 24 of them that are inside the main part of the Serapeum with side doors that allow you to access others. They're still doing excavations of another wing of it too. So it's a very vast underground system. And when we see this in detail, it'll be obvious that you can see that the manufacturing of the box itself with its glassy surfaces, is much finer technology was utilized than the very crude etching of the hieroglyphs. And some of the hieroglyphs or the cartouches there are empty. So the cartouches were never completed, which means quite possibly that this box was up for sale or rental by the priesthood to any individual or noble who had the money or bakshish to be able to finance having their cartouche carved into it to be utilized as some kind of funerary structure. But again, the great mystery is, how was the stone quarried from the Aswan area? How was it moved? How was it set into place in this underground tunnel system where you only have about 12 inches of clearance to the left and right to be able to move around corners? And inside the box, we have Hans Messerschmidt, who's been with us on tour before, and he's inside the box that's in the previous photo. Again, you see the very glossy surfaces, and actually the corners do not come to a true 90-degree angle. There's actually a slight curvature to them. So that's another mystery as to how, what kind of technology was utilized to be able to do this astonishing work that, according to Chris Dunn, could not be done in any quarry in modern times with one piece of stone. He was told to make a box like that, he would have to be able to, or they would have to be able to use 6 pieces, 1 for the bottom, 4 for the sides, 1 for the top. But that is one piece of stone, the lid and the box.
Yeah. And as we saw from the box in the museum and many other boxes they've discovered that were similar to the one in the museum, they cut the top from the bottom of the box, which I find fascinating, and then turn it over, reversing the magnetics of the stone as the lid. So that's kind of fascinating from my opinion. And then on to the Osiris shaft, which is always an option on our tours with Brien, the ability to go down into this incredible, it's 3 levels on a step ladder, basically, down to this incredible, well, let Brien tell you about it.
Well, yeah, the Osiris shaft, it's only been open to the public by special permission, which means you have to pay for it for your group. But it's an incredible thing because it's all carved into the limestone bedrock on the Giza plateau. And as Patricia said, it's 3 levels. You go down one ladder into quite a large room, and then down a much longer ladder into quite a very large room that actually has niches in it. There are 2 boxes inside the niches that look like they literally exploded from the inside out. Very mysterious. And then down the 3rd level into where there is still some water and quite a large box in the middle of it under the water itself. So we don't know what the water level is going to be when we get there, but it's a, I wouldn't say a unique experience, but it's a very, very special thing, which we do each time we go, because people are blown away by the fact that they're able to actually go underneath Giza by as much as 200, like almost 200 feet underneath the surface. Very amazing experience.
Truly. 2 hours, if you can
Another
stand
2 hours.
Not for the meek of heart, I will tell you, but it's quite an experience. And then Abu Roash, the pyramid that is north of Giza, the only major pyramid north of Giza. And here it's said to have been built or constructed by Jetafre, which would have been, and there's speculation on this, but most agree would have been the son of Khufu. But it's the only one that's open and would have either been partially destroyed or probably heavily quarried.
Yeah, some say that it was never finished, that it was one that was under construction. Others believe that it was heavily quarried. We'll see some evidence that there could have, well, there is possible evidence that it actually exploded. So it's again the mystery of the original pyramids, as in those on the Giza plateau and this one, is, well, they're just incredibly mysterious. Then we also see the possibility of there being boat pits at the location. But again, this is special permission. It's very expensive. That's why, you know, you do pay a premium to come on our tours, because we get access to things that are not accessible by the general public.
Yep, absolutely. And this is the famous block. It's curved. It's hard to see in this picture, but they close up, you can see that there are striated saw cuts, or what look like saw cuts. So just laying here next to the pyramid at the site.
Mm-hmm.
And then we open all 3 chambers of the Great Pyramid for everyone to enter. So normally we start off in the King's Chamber, then we open the Queen's and the subterranean chamber. That is all quite an exciting experience for, again, those that are willing to go down into the pit and visit the subterranean chamber.
Yeah, as well as Patricia said, it's quite rare to have all 3 open. That again is by special permission. Quite often when people go into the Great Pyramid, they're able to get into either the King's Chamber or the Queen's Chamber, rarely the subterranean chamber. Subterranean is carved into the bedrock once again, so you're descending into the living rock itself. The King's Chamber, so-called, is highly finished, highly polished granite surfaces. The Queen's Chamber is highly polished limestone. And then the subterranean chamber is actually very crude, looking as if it was never completed. So it's very mysterious, but it's a great experience to be able to go through all 3 of these, 2 hours, once again, 2 hours inside this astonishing ancient structure, one of the last of the original mysterious mysteries of humankind.
And it seems like we're skimming over all this. I mean, we're going to spend a day at the Giza Plateau, visit the Valley Temple, which is, again, an incredible megalithic structure, pre-dynastic, obviously dating to pre-dynastic times, as are the pyramids. What we find around the pyramids, we'll visit the smaller Menkaure pyramid, where we have the knobs that Brien, will talk about, because we see them also in Peru. and many places all over the world. And just so many things. I mean, the Giza Plateau, you know, it's funny. Everybody gets out of the bus or whatever, they arrive in the car and they look up. And when you think about what you're standing on, what's below these structures, I mean, they say up to 7 levels. I've been down 3, looked down to a 4th, but I've heard there's 7 levels. It's like a city underneath our feet. Just, you know, shafts, tunnels, running water. When the Nile flooded, it awakened all these structures, and obviously the Giza Plateau as well. And it would have been an amazing, you know, I can almost hear the sound of the rushing water. And one of the things that's amazing about the Great Pyramid is the resonance, the sound resonance within. And we often work with toning in and around the box, which is, you know, that's something that Hakim had started many, many, many years ago. And the power of just resonant sound in some of these structures that we'll be visiting even throughout Egypt. Just, you know, we've had just about an hour to talk about everything that we're going to do. And it hardly even reflects what everything that we'll talk about, the things we'll point out to you, and the experiences that you'll have. Just amazing.
Well, and also that's why I wanted to start the tour in Aswan, because as we go up the Nile, you'll see beautiful. Now, it's mainly dynastic structures that we're going to be looking at, but you see that, you know, the beautiful work that was done during dynastic times, and then when you reach the Giza Plateau by itself, it's the sheer sense of scale that will blow everyone's mind, because most tours, you know, the first stop will be the Giza Plateau to see the pyramids. And so that's, you know, those are the greatest structures ever made in ancient times on the planet. And so I like saving it for the end, because the sense of scale is just so astonishing. The Great Pyramid is, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 feet tall. I like saving the best, or, you know, quote unquote, the best for the last, rather than that being the peak and then everything being smaller scale and cruder afterwards.
Well, it is an exciting way to see Egypt. I totally agree. And, you know, to end up at the Great Pyramid. And again, you know, I go back to the halls of records, that the Great Pyramid itself, you know, has so much knowledge embedded within it. It's mind boggling, you know, definitely not done by, an unintelligent prehistoric race. This was achieved by a civilization of super high consciousness. You know, people say it could have been aliens, it could have been gods, you know, it could have been humanity at their height of consciousness. And then as we see the craftsmanship devolve, we see, you know, human, consciousness itself devolves. But giving us hope that, you know, if at one time we had this amazing higher consciousness, then, you know, we can flip everything around and, you know, remember how powerful we really are. Just saying.
Are you guys doing a private at the Sphinx as well?
Not this year. We've done that the last couple of years, and we wanted to mix it up a bit. And that's why we added Roash and the Step Pyramid, the Osirion, and of course the Great Pyramid and all the shafts within it. So we like to mix it up every year, because we have so many of our guests return so often. We have, you know, guests that come back multiple times. And that's the thing about Egypt. Every time we have a tour, we discover new things, we see new things, and the magic of what the group creates, the doors that open to us. You know, as Brien pointed out, we do a lot that's off the beaten path. We stay longer at the sites. And that enables us to discover more. And Egypt itself, they're restoring so many of the different sites and opening new areas to us. And of course, we're hoping that the new Grand Egyptian Museum will be open by April. And, you know, we have every reason to believe it will. So many exciting new things to see every year that we come back and do this together.
Well, also the sheer scale of this museum It's the largest single building museum in the world. Once it's, it's in the very final stages of completion. But what's going to intrigue me is not simply what has been moved from the Cairo Museum into this one, but what have they taken from underground, from the tunnel system underneath the storage facilities of the Cairo Museum, where there are hundreds of thousands of artifacts. I'd like to see how many of those artifacts are going to be put into the new museum, and if we'll see even more evidence of ancient machining technology, like with the stone bowls that we saw previously in this talk. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
I'm sure we will, Brien. Suzan and I got a sneak peek back in 2018. They have 17 laboratories, which is, again, unheard of in the world. So they're actually doing work for museums all over the world, I believe now. But they're bringing in artifacts from the basements of all the museums, because there's museums all over Egypt. And they're bringing in artifacts that have just been in storage. So, yes, I'll be first in line as soon as they open the doors to the public, because I just can't wait to see what hasn't been seen yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to wrap it up for today, and hopefully we'll get Brien to come back and we'll go in depth about more things in the future. But I want to encourage everybody, if you've ever thought about coming to Egypt, to join us in April with Brien Foerster and Suzan Moore, our geologist. And if you can, the tourism in Egypt is exploding again. Since, after the last 3 years when we've been isolating and not able to travel, people are coming back. So I want to encourage you, if you're interested, to try and register as soon as possible. Get that deposit in to reserve your space, hopefully by the end of January, to ensure that you'll be able to join us. We have an amazing group forming, and you don't want to miss the opportunity. We'd love to have you with us.
Our website is horusrising.com. Brien's website is hiddenincatours.com. Thanks for joining us, Brien.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia.
Great to see you, Brien.
Okay, see you in April.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.